Krishna. Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Bal, Hare Krishna. Trying to get regulated. Hare Krishna. Not just for the sake of being regulated anymore, but because it's favorable for chanting Hare Krishna to be regulated. Hare Bol, just Hare Krishna. Trying to get regulated. Like, specific times. Hare Krishna for chanting Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. Hare Bol. Krishna. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Shri Advaita Gadadhar. Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktivedanta. You'd think after all these years, 50 years of practicing Krishna consciousness, I'd have it down, I don't. I'm still trying to get... Where's Krishna? Krishna. So, okay, I've surrendered to follow what Prabhupada said to do. 16 rounds. Okay, I've surrendered, finally. Now, I did it for years, but it was just kind of mechanical, just chanting Hare Krishna, get it out of the way so I could go do something else, which was really important, whatever that other else was. And that worked for a little while. But it's out of balance. And something Prabhupada said to a disciple that approached him and said, the disciple said, Prabhupada, we're chanting Hare Krishna, so we'll do better service. Right, Prabhupada? We'll do more service, we'll do better service. That's why we're chanting Hare Krishna, right? Prabhupada said, no. You're doing service, so you will chant better. It's like the horse before the cart, If you want to actually get there, you got to put the horse before the cart. So, there's nothing more important than the chanting, Hare Krishna. But to be able to do the chanting, there are certain guidelines. One of them is to avoid certain activities that cloud the thinking. Intoxication, illicit sex, gambling, not just with money, but with the teachings and the philosophy, speculating, moving things around. That was what Prabhupada was trying to help Ghandi with, is that he was speculating. Ghandi would take teachings from here and teachings from there and teachings from somewhere else and make a big hodgepodge. Because he had some other goal than actually Krishna consciousness. His goal, he wanted to do something political, thinking that was going to really benefit people. That would solve, he thought, Indian independence, that'll solve all the problems. It only made it worse. Because once India got independence, then the Indians that were now ruling India couldn't agree. And everything was all split and there was riots and then the Muslims were still unhappy and everybody was, it was even worse than it was before the British were in there. At least the British kept rule of law, you know. It's like this. And they didn't allow the Muslims and the Hindus to clash because the British were in control. Which, that's not all that great either. But that's not the solution. Prabhupada had the solution. He tried. Solution is we have to take shelter of Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. So on a social scale, there's organization and structure to get the whole thing to head toward Krishna. And on an individual basis, there's structure. There are things to avoid. And for chanting, there's offenses. If someone's chanting, committing offenses to the first offense, there's 10 listed, but the first offense is to blaspheme the devotees who dedicate their lives to propagating Krishna consciousness. It doesn't say they're pure devotees necessarily, but they're dedicating their lives, they're doing the best they can. An image that comes to mind is Lord Ramachandra and the little tiny chipmunk or the spider or whatever it was that was trying to help build the bridge to Lanka to rescue Sita from Ravan. And Hanuman was there, and he was throwing big mountain peaks into the ocean to make this bridge. And evidently, the bridge is still there. It's submerged underwater, but there is a bridge made out of rocks and stones that separates the Indian continent from Lanka, which is just off the coast. So Hanuman's throwing these big peaks in, and this little spider or chipmunk, I don't know, it's described differently, somebody insignificant, is kicking little pebbles of sand in. And Hanuman thinks, oh, he's in the way. Besides, I don't want to step on him. Get out of the way. And Ram, no, he's not in the way. I'm accepting his service just like I'm accepting yours. He's very dear to me. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Oh boy. Oh boy. Let's read something here in Prabhupada. Krishna. Krishna Chaitanya. Yeah, so we have to avoid offenses. You know? The first offense, blaspheme devotees who are dedicating their lives, even if they're just little spiders or chipmunks. It's an offense to chanting. It's an offense to Krishna. And if someone makes that offense, they can go on chanting. Prabhupada said, if somebody's chanting offensively, they can go on chanting like that for hundreds and hundreds of lifetimes and not make any advancement. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare. We shouldn't offend anybody. Never mind, don't offend devotees. Don't offend, why offend anybody? Even just a regular spider who's not building a bridge to Lanka and still pushing little grains of sand around or something. Don't offend him anyway. He's actually serving Krishna. It's a little indirect, but he's... Everyone's playing a part in the scheme of things. That's why Krishna says, not a blade of grass moves without my sanction. Hare Krishna. We're really, really, really bewildered by this machine that we have. We really think it's something. It is something, but it's not what we think it is. They're working on robots and artificial intelligence now. They want to create someone. They're working, it's Frankenstein, right? They're going to put it all together, One group is working on stem cells, which grow cells. Another group is working on artificial intelligence. And another group is working on, plastics and electro-neurological stuff. And they're making these robots. They're trying to put it all together. And I've heard that all this research, it's very hush-hush. Well, they don't, it's top secret stuff. A lot of it's connected to the, defense, government, Department of Defense. A lot of money put into that. And the money that's going for defense isn't just for, machine guns and tanks. It's for research. And a lot of the research is, who knows what they're researching. But from what I understand, and I've heard, is they're at least 50 years ahead of what we know they're working on. In other words, they're working on stuff that they're 50 years ahead. And a lot of it is this artificial intelligence and robotics and Hare Krishna, Krishna Chaitanya. Woohoo! But whatever they come up with, the devotee just uses it for Krishna anyway. Like they came up with this internet and Facebook technology, video chats. I remember as a child, we had the landline hanging on the wall in the hallway. The old thing where you dial up, We actually had a party line because we couldn't afford a private line. So you couldn't use the phone if somebody else was using it in another household somewhere. Anyway, and I remember, my parents used to joke, yeah, someday you'll actually be able to see and talk to the person at the same time. Yeah, someday they'll have that. Krishna. So they came up with this stuff, and the devotees use it. Just like these drones, That's Department of Defense. They use these drones to, attack. Well, the devotees are using drones to take beautiful pictures of the new TOVP in Mayapur from the air. Hare Krishna. Whatever they come up with, we'll use. Hare Krishna. Krishna, Krishna, if it isn't, destructive. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We're really enamored of this thing. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Okay, so let's read some more Prabhupada. It's so nice. Pastimes and activities of this great soul who is giving us the world. He's taking it to a new level. He built on his predecessors. He didn't try to change the course. He was on course with all the predecessor acharyas, and he simply expanded it. He didn't change it or try to do something else. He simply expanded. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And he also said that to further expand Lord Chaitanya's movement, devotees will have to be empowered by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to actually be able to. We can spread it, what we have, we can share it and spread it, but to expand it, to go deeper, that will have to be an empowered representative of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Meanwhile, Hare Krishna. So Prabhupada tried to convince the committee for Gandhi's memorial, they had sufficient funds to do something spectacular, that they should give it to him and let him glorify Gandhi as a saint as well as a politician, not just a politician. So evidently, they didn't accept it because where's the memorial? But anyway, another little section here. While on business in Madurai in South India, Abai showed some of his writings to Swami Chetty, another medical salesman. Mr. Chetty was impressed and felt he could persuade a wealthy friend, Dr. Alagappa, the famous Birla of the South, to finance the printing. Birla of the South. I gotta look these things up. Who's this? What was he famous for? I gotta see. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Okay, Google. Who's the Birla of the South? Come on, you know everything. Okay, Birla. Wikipedia. The Birla family are a caste of Vaishya traders, outcast from the traditional community, merchants, and they're from Rajasthan. Hare Krishna, the Birla of the South. They were extremely wealthy. Okay, so he was the Birla of the South. So, Alagappa. So this Muthuswami Chetty is going to try to connect Prabhupada to a source of funds. Dr. Alagappa, the famous Burla of the South, to finance the printing. In April of 1948, Mr. Chetty wrote to Abai saying that he had been prompted to help Abai by something God has meant. He asked Abai Charan to send him the complete Gita Upanishad manuscript so he could present it to Dr. Alagappa in Madras. Mr. Chetty had already written Dr. Alagappa about the first-class work Gita Upanishad to cover 1,200 pages of royal size, and had urged him to publish it for the benefit of religious-minded people. Okay, so they're approaching this wealthy guy to give some charity for a good cause, a religious cause. He had also mentioned that Abai had been trying to publish the book since 1946. Dr. Alagappa soon replied to Mr. Chetty that he was interested. And Mr. Chetty wrote to Abai, "I'm on my way to help you, and only God must help me." As for talking business with Dr. Alagappa, there would be no need, since once he does it, it is for the sake of benevolence. Anticipating success, Mr. Chetty invited Abai to come to Madras to meet Dr. Alagappa. Quote, "There he will arrange for what God has meant for you to do in your religious duty." End quote. In Madras, Abai would be able to check and correct the proofs of the manuscript and see the book through the various stages of printing. It was a big opportunity, and Abai was not one to miss an opportunity. If the book could be published, it would be a great victory in his mission to fulfill the request of Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati. So Prabhupada saw the Gita as originally 3 volumes, 1,200 pages. What we have here, finally, is all in one volume, around 850 pages. Pretty close. But then the worst thing happened. Oh no. The manuscript was stolen. It was the only copy, the one Abai was keeping safely at home. He questioned his family and servants. No one knew what had happened. Abai was baffled. So much work had been undone. He felt he had worked so many months for nothing. Although he couldn't prove anything, he suspected that his servant or even his son might have done it with a motive for money. But it remained a mystery. Wow. That happened in New York also. His typewriter was stolen. Krishna! During 1949, Abai wrote articles in Bengali and submitted them to his godbrother B.P. Keshava Maharaj, who published them in the Gaudiya Patrika. Abai's format for addressing the world problems was the same as his spiritual masters. Even at their first meeting in 1922, Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati had countered Abai's nationalistic arguments by stressing that the real crisis in the world was neither social, nor political, nor anything material. You had to get that horse before the cart, you know. But was simply the dearth of transcendental knowledge. I believe from the usage, dearth means lack, or the absence. Abai simply elaborated on this theme. He never advocated that the ordinary concerns of the world be disregarded, But he stressed that crises can be solved only when the leadership is God conscious. If Krishna consciousness were put first, other concerns could be brought into line. But without Krishna consciousness, so-called solutions were only folly. Abai began his first Bengali article by quoting an editorial from the Allahabad edition of the Calcutta newspaper, Amrita Bazar. The editor had sorely lamented that India's worst troubles had not yet ended, despite national independence. So this is an excerpt from Prabhupada's first article in the publication printed by his godbrothers. The National Week has begun. The memories of Jallianwala Bagh and political serfdom no longer trouble us. But our trouble is far from being at an end. In the dispensation of providence, man cannot have any rest. If one kind of trouble goes, another quickly follows. India, politically free, is facing the difficulties no less serious than those that troubled us under foreign rule. Abai seized on this editorial reflection as proof of the basic defect of all worldly plans for amelioration. He pointed out, he used to laugh at the, well, not laugh, he didn't really think it was funny, but laugh like, it's ridiculous, it's comical, can't you see? When the United Nations, but all Prabhupada saw was a zillion different flags. How is it united? Everybody's got their own flag. How it's not united at all. You have to be under one flag. Either Hanuman or Garuda or a tilak symbol or something. One flag. Abai seized on editorial reflection as proof of the basic defect of worldly plans for amelioration. He pointed out that although India had been subjugated by foreign rulers since the time of Muhammad Ghori, the year 1050, so this was a really big deal, Indian independence. They'd been under foreign rule, the Muslims, the Indians, and who knows who else, since the year 1050. That's like almost 1,000 years. India prior to that had never been subjugated. In those days, India had been a God-conscious nation. It was when India's leaders had abandoned their spiritual heritage that India had fallen. So something happened in the year 1050. Thus, Indians should see that they were now being punished by the stringent laws of nature. This is how he was writing. There's a quote. The honorable editor of Amrita Bazar Patrik, Abai noted, has written so sadly, if trouble goes, another quickly follows. But that was stated in Bhagavad Gita a long time previously. It was the same theme he had stated in 1944, his Back to God articles, and the theme of so many of his letters, too. Man, due to his neglect of the Supreme Lord, is being punished by material nature, which is directly controlled by the Supreme Lord. So sometimes I've heard the question raised and answered. In the Western countries, they're so sinful. They're doing horrible things. It's really so sinful. And yet they have so many material facilities and assets. And they're living like little kings and queens. Big houses. Nice infrastructure. So, why? India, the land of spirituality, is suffering so much. It seems to be a backward country. Why? So the way Prabhupada answered it is, in the West, they're simply reaping the results of previous good karma, but it will come to an end. But India is suffering the results of turning away from their duties and responsibilities for spiritual leadership. Man, due to his neglect of the Supreme Lord, is being punished by material nature. So he's writing to Indians, which is directly controlled by the Supreme Lord. Men may write newspaper articles, pass measures at meetings and conferences, and attempt to overcome nature by scientific research, yet they will remain unable to surmount nature's law. As they try to escape their punishments, the Supreme Lord will cast them deeper into illusion, and they will fail miserably. Abai quoted an appropriate Bengali saying, "I was trying to make a statue of Shiva, but I ended up making a monkey." Bengalis have so many interesting sayings. I never saw that one before. I was trying to make a statue of Shiva, but I ended up with a monkey. I was trying to be an Acharya, and I ended up a mouse. Krishna. So here's a passage from the article again. In order to rid the world of misery and bring about happiness, we have now created atomic bomb. Seeing the all-pervading destruction which could take place in the near future by atomic reactions, Western thinkers have become greatly disturbed. Some people try to give consolation, saying that we will only use this atomic energy to bring about happiness in the world. This is also another enigma of the illusory potency. The problem, Abai explained, was that the world was lacking Krishna-conscious devotees. Leaders under the influence of material nature could never solve problems of the world. Materialistic illusion was especially prevalent in the Western countries, which Indians should not try to imitate. Abai prophesied, however, that Krishna consciousness would one day reach the West. So the article continues. In the Western countries, there has never been any discussion of the relation between the atomic individual soul and the supreme, complete, conscious personality of Godhead. There has never been any discussion of the relation of the atomic individual soul and the supreme, complete, conscious personality of Godhead. Neither their activities nor their state in ultimate perfection has been investigated. That is why, even though they have made so much material advancement, they are squirming in the burning poison of sensualism. We can be absolutely certain that India's real peace formula will one day reach their ears. Wow. They are squirming in the burning poison of sensualism. Like maggots in the garbage, squirming. Abai's article began appearing regularly in the Ghandi Patrika. His godbrothers appreciated his writings. His denunciation of materialistic mentality was reminiscent of Srila Bhaktivedanta's. In Abai's hands, the Bhagavad Gita's concept of the Asura, or the demon, was no longer merely a depiction of a mythological or legendary enemy. The Asuras had come to life in the modern day Hitler, Churchill, or even an Indian prime minister. But, as Abai pointed out, his denunciation of the misleaders was not his own. He was only repeating the words of Krishna. I think it comes to light later that it was his wife that stole the Bhagavad Gita so she could buy tea biscuits. I think he finds out later. When he gets ready to take sannyas, and that's a good enough reason. Krishna, I think that's revealed a little later. During 1950 and 51, he continued his letter writing, attempting to gain a hearing with various organizations and leaders. He wrote the World Pacifist Committee, the President of India, and the Minister of Education. He wrote to the Indian Congress for Cultural Freedom, which wrote back suggesting that Abai had written them by mistake. He wrote to an official of the All Religions Conference in Bombay, advising that because of their approach, nothing practical would come out of the conference. Quote, "The practical solution is lying in the transcendental message of Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, as given by him in Bhagavad Gita." End quote. On September 14, 1951, he corresponded with Daniel Bailey of the American Reporter. He received the instruction from Bhaktivedanta, or the order to preach in English. It was in the 30s. So now we're like 20 years later. Bhaktivedanta has been gone, like 5 or 6 years? When did he leave? I don't know. Can't remember. On September 14, 1951, he corresponded with Daniel Bailey of the American Reporter, a magazine published by the American Embassy in New Delhi. Abai pointed out that the philosophy of understanding the absolute truth, as realized by the sages of India, was higher than attempts to combine East and West. Mr. Bailey replied that he was aware of Eastern philosophical and religious influence in the West, and cited the progress of a yoga mission in New York City, which had some influence on the Protestants in America. But when Abai asked if one of his articles could appear in the American Reporter, Mr. Bailey replied, "If we were to give considerable space in the American Reporter to, say, the Bhagavad Gita, we are, in all fairness, would have to give equal space to other philosophies, and a desire is not to endorse or condemn any of them, but simply to assist in a better understanding." Yeah, this is what stops a lot of the government being able to facilitate Krishna consciousness. Because it would facilitate your religious group, then we have to facilitate this, and they'll all be pounding on our door. This is what it stops at. So he's just expressing how that is. We don't want to endorse or condemn any of them, but simply to assist in a better understanding. In a further reply, Abai differed with Mr. Bailey's contention that people should be encouraged to make their own interpretation of religion. So Prabhupada, quote, "Less intelligent men are always guided by those who are superior in knowledge in all spheres of life." End quote. Abai even wrote to the Ford Foundation in Detroit. Wow, later on, the heir to the Ford company fortune, Alfred Ford, became, what's his name? He's initiated disciple of Prabhupada, and largely due to his support, especially financially, the TOVP is being constructed. So Abai even wrote to the Ford Foundation in Detroit, and a staff assistant wrote back, "Regret to advise that we are unable to pursue your suggestions concerning the establishment of an association of the intelligent class of people The Ford Foundation has no program in which specific ideas, such as you describe, might be included. So they were giving charity, but they weren't able to, again, like the government, they can't take sides on any specific, pushing any specific agenda. Although most of his suggestions were rejected, occasionally he received words of appreciation. A certain Dr. Mohammed Saeed, PhD, a professor at the University of Allahabad, wrote, "You seem to have assimilated the universal teaching of ancient India, which is really laudable." And the governor of Uttar Pradesh replied, "You are doing noble work, for nothing is nobler than to be God-minded." Kind of wishy-washy, lukewarm acknowledgement. Not only was Abai giving advice in his letters, but he was hinting that he could also give practical help. He could obtain if he could obtain institutional backing, he was prepared to do many things: teach classes, manage temples, teach temple worship, initiate devotees, as well as organize various kinds of field work to propagate principles of Bhagavad Gita. Usually, he did not spell out exactly how things should be done, but he pointed to the philosophical defects in the present methods and the superiority of working in accord with the Vedic literature. So this is 1951. Prabhupada passed away at 81. He's 81 years old in 1978. So how old? I think he's like 50 years old when he's doing this. Around 50 years old. My math. '78, 51, 27 years. So 81 minus 27, 54, I think. So he's in his 50s. Prime of life. By the grace of his spiritual master, he knew the science of applying Bhagavad Gita to almost any situation. If someone would only show interest, he could teach that person the superiority of working according to Bhagavad Gita. After attending a meeting in which a prominent industrialist had stressed harmonious relationships between labor and management in his factory, Abai wrote a long letter suggesting the man consider the good effects the congregational chanting of Hare Krishna could produce. Since the factory had a special employees' club and lounge, Abai suggested that the workers assemble there and chant Hare Krishna. Abai urged everyone to surrender to Krishna, but most people had their own philosophies and took his spirit to be sectarian or proselytizing. But Bhagavad Gita was universal, Abai wrote, and God could not be omitted from any program, even in the name of a secular state. Krishna, as the father of all living beings, had jurisdiction over all programs, organizations, and governments. Indians especially should appreciate the universal scope of Bhagavad Gita. Although Abai always had a plan of action behind his suggestions, he first sought the interest of his correspondent. If there wasn't much interest, and he was repeatedly turned down, but he never felt discouraged. He always anticipated finding a sympathizer. He kept copies of all his letters and their replies. That's why we have excerpts here. He kept copies of all his letters and the replies. A word of appreciation or a slight show of interest from a correspondent being sufficient to elicit from Abai another thoughtful reply. If they responded even a little bit, then he would write back again. He had developed a keen sense of dedication to Lord Chaitanya's mission, without expecting leadership from the Gaudiya Math. He still cherished the idea that his godbrothers would soon come together and preach, but he didn't put any energy in the mats, since to do so would mean to become involved in one of the factions, because it wasn't a united effort anymore. It was this faction, that faction, and if he gave support to this mat, then what about the other mat? So he just, staying clear of the Gaudiya Math's internal fray, Abai continued his letter-writing campaign alone, introducing himself as a preacher of Bhagavad Gita and editor of Back to Godhead magazine. You can't say he isn't plucky. Man, he's plucky. He's all alone. They stole his Bhagavad Gita. His business is not doing all that great. Everyone's ignoring him or rejecting him outright. Krishna! If that isn't enough to make you chant Hare Krishna and really take shelter, I mean, Krishna! Okay, so the next little section, not this time, but next time, is when Prabhupada's business fails. The whole thing fails. He has to close the factory. He can't pay anybody. He goes bankrupt. Krishna. Woohoo! Krishna. Bhaktisiddhanta told him, take sannyas. So he's going to be in a position to take sannyas really soon. Krishna. Chaitanya. Haribol.